All right, if you're getting ready for the teacher eligibility test, you know the CDP section can feel, well, a little overwhelming. But what if there was a simple blueprint to help you crush it? Well, that's exactly what we're going to build together in this explainer. We're going to give you a visual crash course that will really boost your confidence. So let's jump right in.
So, here's our game plan, a 4-part blueprint. First, we'll lay down the fundamental principles of development. You gotta have a strong foundation, right? Then we'll meet the core theorists, the big names whose ideas you'll definitely see on the exam. After that, we'll dive into the mechanics of how we all learn. And finally, we'll bring it all home by decoding some real TET exam questions. Ready? Let's get into part 1.
Okay, kicking things off with part 1, the fundamental principles of development. Before we can really get into guys like Piaget or Vygotsky, we have to get these core concepts straight. Let's lay the groundwork so everything else makes perfect sense. Okay, first things first, let's clear something up that trips a lot of people up. Growth versus development. They are not the same thing. Think of it like this. Growth is just about the numbers. It's quantitative. We're talking height, weight, physical stuff you can measure. Development, on the other hand, is the whole picture. It's the entire progressive journey toward maturity, psychological, emotional, the whole shebang. And that note on self-concept, super important. We aren't born with a sense of self. It's something that develops over time.
Now, this development isn't just random. It follows predictable patterns, and you absolutely need to know these too. First, the cephalocaudal principle. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It just means development moves from head to foot. A baby gains control of its head and neck way before it can walk. Simple. Second is general to specific. This is when a toddler calls every 4-legged animal a doggy. That's a general response. Later, they learn to be specific, to tell the difference between a dog and a cat. This whole natural unfolding of our biological plan, we call that maturation.
All right, with those principles locked in, let's move on to the main event, part 2, the core theorists. You can think of these people as the architects of child psychology. Their names and ideas are going to be all over the TET, so paying close attention here is a real game changer.
And we have to start with the giant himself, Jean Piaget. He argued that kids' thinking develops through 4 clear stages. Now, for the exam, there are 2 concepts you have to nail. The first is object permanence. You know this. It's that aha moment when a baby realizes that even when you play peekaboo and hide your face, you still exist. The second is accommodation. This is all about how our brains adapt. So a child might have a mental folder for dog, but when they see a cat for the first time, they have to accommodate this new information, basically creating a whole new mental folder for cat.
So, if Piaget was focused on the individual, Lev Vygotsky was all about the social side of learning. His huge idea is called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. Just look at the diagram. The ZPD is that magical space between what a person can do on their own and what they can do with a little guidance. The bow and arrow example here is perfect. That help from a parent, that social intervention, is what bridges the gap and makes real learning happen. Okay, time for a rapid-fire round with 3 more key figures. First up, Lawrence Kohlberg. He was obsessed with moral development, how we figure out right from wrong. Next, Erikson. He looked at our whole lives as a series of 8 stages, with each stage having its own big psychological challenge, like a baby learning to trust or mistrust the world. And of course, there's Sigmund Freud. He's pretty much the father of psychoanalysis and gave us our first real look into human personality and the power of our unconscious minds.
Let's shift gears for a second and talk about intelligence and creativity. A key name to know here is Howard Gardner. He completely rejected the idea of a single IQ. Instead, he said we have multiple intelligences. You could be musically intelligent or spatially intelligent. Now, for the exam, you need to remember one number, an IQ score below 70. That's the clinical threshold for an intellectual disability. And whenever you see the word creativity, your mind should immediately jump to divergent thinking. It's not just being artsy, it's the skill of brainstorming tons of different solutions to one problem.
So, we've covered the principles and the big theorists. Now for part 3, the mechanics of learning. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty. How do we actually learn things? How do we pick up new skills and knowledge? Let's take a look.
This slide breaks down the big 3 of behaviorism. First, Thorndike's law of effect. It's so simple. If an action leads to a good outcome, you're more likely to do it again. Next, you have Ivan Pavlov and classical conditioning. This is all about learned associations. It's how his dogs learned to drool at the sound of a bell because they associated it with food. Finally, there's B.F. Skinner and operant conditioning, which is about using rewards and punishments to shape behavior. And here's a pro tip.
That note about variable reinforcement, like a slot machine, is one of the most powerful motivators there is.
Okay, as educators, this is incredibly important. This grid is your essential guide to 4 specific learning disabilities you'll encounter. You've got dyslexia for reading, dysgraphia for writing, dyscalculia for math, and dysphagia for language. But, and this is a huge but, look at that note on the bottom. This is a classic exam question. A slow learner is different. They can get the work done, they just need more time. It's an issue of pace, not a specific disability like the others. Don't mix them up.
We're almost there. Our blueprint is nearly complete. We've got the principles, the theorists, and the mechanics. Now for the most critical part. Let's put this blueprint to the test. Let's see how all this knowledge helps us absolutely decode questions you'll find on the TET exam.
Okay, let's start with a classic, straight-up factual question you're very likely to see. According to the Right to Education Act, which age group gets free and compulsory education? Have a think. What's your answer? And the correct answer is C, 6 to 14 years. This is one of those things you just have to memorize. It's a key piece of legislation that shows up constantly on the TET, so make sure you lock that one away in your memory.
Now let's try a different style, a scenario question. So Samira returns a book. But here's the key. She doesn't do it because it's the right thing to do. She does it because she's afraid of getting punished. Which of Kohlberg's levels does that sound like to you?
The magic words here are afraid of being punished. That's your big clue. That tells you the answer is A, the pre-conventional level. At this stage, morality is all about external stuff, obeying rules and avoiding trouble. It's not about some deep internal sense of right and wrong yet.
Okay, let's do a quick rapid-fire review to make sure these concepts are sticking. Ready? Piaget's stage where object permanence pops up, that's the sensory motor stage. What do we call it when we have to modify our mental frameworks? Accommodation. And that principle where development goes from head to foot? Cephalocaudal. See? You're already starting to think like the test wants you to.
Let's look at just 2 more. That first scenario about punkage and the bow and arrow, that is Vygotsky 101. The dad's guidance is the scaffolding that helps punkage learn something in his zone of proximal development. Now, that second question is one of those tricky ones where you have to spot the incorrect statement. And the one that's just flat out wrong is C. The idea that infants don't have emotions? Of course they do. They show joy, fear, and distress right from the very beginning.
And so here we are, with our complete cognitive blueprint. You can really see how it all connects now, can't you? The principles of development, the big 4 theorists, how conditioning works, and the roots of learning disabilities. They aren't separate topics, they're all interwoven. Once you see those connections, you're not just memorizing facts anymore, you have a real framework for mastering the TE exam. So we'll leave you with one last question to think about. As you look back on all these theories, from Piaget's stages to Vygotsky's social learning to Skinner's reinforcements, which one do you think best explains your own learning style? Are you someone who needs to explore and build things for yourself, or do you learn best when you have a guide? Thinking about that is the absolute best way to make these ideas truly your own. Thanks for joining us.